In the previous part, Jinan spent 3 days at sea and thought that he would not get out of here. In the distance, he saw 2 ships and decided to share them in order to escape. There was a battle on the ship between pirates and the Order of the Sea Dragon. Jinan helped the Order fend off the pirates, and those pirates were written off as a disaster. He met the captain of the ship and they promised him that they would deliver the guy to the shore. In the port, he met the head of the clan of sea dragons. Jinan met the captain's daughter and had strange feelings for her. The Order of the Sea Dragon tested Jinan for integrity and forced him to fight against the best warriors they had. When he proved himself to be a good warrior, he was offered the ladies' escort carriage as a guard. In the forest, they were attacked by robbers and wanted to steal misses. But Jinan rebuffed them and wanted to destroy all the robbers who dared to attack them. The robbers were frightened when they saw what this guy was capable of. They understood that it would be useless to fight him and decided to save themselves by disaster. Jinan was not going to let these robbers out of here alive, and he was already very angry with them and wanted to destroy everyone. The bandit was sitting on the ground, and I think that he most likely has already come to an end. He is unlikely to be able to survive in the battle against such a strong warrior. Jinan approached this robber and stood right in front of him. Jinan was very angry with these bandits. He did not show his anger on the outside. This bandit was sitting on the ground and trembling with fear. He asked Jinan what he would do with him if he just turned him in. Will this gentleman be able to spare him? Jinan raised his head and replied to this rogue that he is not one of those people who enjoys someone else's death and said that there is no point in killing people who give up. But Jinan asked this robber why they wanted to steal a girl about them, and if he honestly answers this question, then the guy will let go of all the bandits who want to surrender. The robber was silent and did not want to answer this question. He understood that if he told the reason why it was necessary to kidnap the girl, then other bandits could kill him for this. But the guys were not interested at all. And he asked this robber not to keep him waiting. Jinan said that there were serious burns on his brother's body. If he was not taken to the doctor, he might die. So the bandits had to hurry up to tell the reason for the kidnapping of the girl. Otherwise, his brother would die now. The bandit put his head down and sighed heavily and answered that Junhwa asked them to kidnap the girl. She overheard their dialogue, came closer and turned to the bandit. She wanted to know who exactly ordered her kidnapping. She wanted to ask him if the master of their organization really asked to kidnap her. He replied that everything was exactly like this. This gentleman ordered the robbers to kidnap the girl and bring her to him. Jinan asked this guy, was there any other solution to this problem? Why did it have to be done in such a drastic way? He replied that they chose such a radical method of kidnapping only because the master ordered them to bring this girl at all costs. She was very surprised because she did not understand why this gentleman needed her so much. I became very interested in her why he decided to hire mercenaries for this. The sword was flying in the air and spinning around its axis. This sword stuck in the ground and stuck there in the forest. 2 people fought. One of the guys dressed in blue knocked the ball from his opponent and said that he wanted to stop this battle. He told his enemy that his master would hardly want a full-scale war. He looked at his opponent and said that besides, even if they continue this battle, his enemy will still have no chance. It was very hard to believe, but nevertheless they had a very capable fighter who could defeat all these robbers alone. The thug realized that he lost the battle along with his bandits and asked what his opponent wanted from him. Did he really need to ask for mercy? He took his wounded leader and lifted him leaning on his shoulder. Then he approached the second robber with green hair and said that they urgently need to leave and take their leader to the doctor. Jinan watched them go into the distance and disappear into the thicket of the forest. He could not believe that he set fire to a person with his magic. He understood that it was possible not to do this. But nevertheless, at that moment, he still used his magic and crippled another person. He understood that this was all due to the fact that he sucked internal black energy from that person, and this energy was black. It aroused in him a thirst for murder. He did not try to suppress his energy. He succumbed, and that is why he caused such severe injuries to that person. Jinan understood that if these bandits continued to attack him, and all the other guards further, he would hardly be able to stop, and would kill all of them in order to get rid of this thirst for murder that now lives inside his mind. He wanted to understand if there was anything else he didn't know about the technique of absorbing the power of heaven and earth and controlling the soul. He first absorbed the magic of a person with dark energy, and now darkness appeared inside him too. It began to rain in the forest, and he gradually made his way through the trees and leaves and fell into the forest. This rain intensified every minute and was not going to end. Most likely, it will continue until the morning. They got to the nearest house, which was located in this forest, and stopped there. The mistress of business in her room was minding her own business. At that moment, Jinan stood on the veranda of this house and watched the rain drip. She saw the guy standing and thinking about something on the veranda of this house. She decided to thank him for saving them all and said that if not for him, then the guards would hardly have left this forest alive, and she would most likely have been kidnapped. Jinan replied that you should not thank you because it was his job, but decided to ask her a question and asked about which young master she spoke with the robber in the forest. At that moment she realized that he did not know about which gentleman they did not talk then in the forest. She asked him if he knew anything about Chi Junhua's trade organization. Jinan tried to remember everything he knew about this organization and replied that he knew that this was one of the 3 largest trade groups in the entire continent. The girl said that the owner is the organization Tak Chung Bo and his second son Tak In Hyo is the same young master Tak who ordered her to be kidnapped. Jinan finally figured out this whole situation, and he had one very important question. Why did this gentleman want to kidnap the girl? She told that 10 months ago, a hawk flew to their palace from this organization and brought a letter in which it was said that the young master wanted to take the girl to him. She said that last year was her grandparents' 60th birthday, and there was supposed to be a celebration in the palace that brought together many very important people from all over the continent. The young master also arrived at the palace that day, and he asked the girl to show her the whole palace, and she agreed, and not that day they walked for a very long time. It was then that he noticed this girl, and most likely fell in love with her. This man felt that he could afford to take the girl even without her consent. She said that she did not want to marry a young master, and her father was also categorically against such an act. But the whole problem was that no matter how much they wanted to do it, to refuse such a profitable marriage was very stupid for no good reason. And the Sea Dragons organization belonged to the association, so there were some things that they were not allowed to decide in the association. The authorities constantly make advantageous marriages between organizations and families in order to earn as much money as possible. The girl didn't say anything else. She went to her room and decided to be alone. It was very hard for her to talk about this topic because she understood that her father and she was powerless in this situation. No matter how much they wanted to, they still could not refuse this marriage because the association would not allow them to do this. And this fact caused a lot of pain. Night fell on the streets. It was quiet and calm. All the people were in the buildings. A young guy in a dark cloak was walking along the corridors of one of the houses with quiet steps. He opened the door to the room and announced that Cho Yong Hyang had come, and soon this lady would arrive in Tai'an. The girl was sitting at her desk and looking at the pictures, but when she was told this news, she turned around and asked him if even her brother would come. He replied that he had received word that In Hyo was already next to Tai'an. The girl answered, "You too, that you need to hurry there." But the guy was surprised when he heard this. Then he replied that he would go there with pleasure because he was very interested in how much she had changed while he had not seen her. She let his head down and said that because of this girl, her brother and this guy constantly have a heart that bleeds. They can't stop thinking about her. The guy laughed and said that everything was completely wrong, and he was only trying to attract her attention in order to complete the task that the lady had set for him. She answered him that even if everything is as he says, you still need to try very hard, because the parental home is already looking forward to when they finally succeed. She replied that thanks to this case, she would be able to decide how best to treat him and asked not to disappoint her next time. The guy replied that she had nothing to worry about and everything would be done in the best possible way, and he could erase Jo Young Hyang from In Hyo's heart. Then he said to his mistress, maybe to erase this girl from his heart. Maybe not enough. It would be better to erase her from his head so that he would never think about her again. And remember, She replied that this was a great idea, and that is what she is trying to achieve. She wants him to finally forget about her and not even remember. She wanted to do it for her brother. There were a lot of people in the city that day. They all gathered in the square. The rain stopped and the weather was fine. Jinan, along with his wife and the guards, sat in the restaurant and waited for their food. They were very hungry, and as soon as they brought food, they immediately ate everything. Then they brought tea. The guards said that they were lucky because no one attacked them on the way to the city of Tan. He's with Mrs. Is she going to go up to Taishan today? She replied that today they would not rest here tomorrow morning to go there because there was no point in hurrying them. At that moment, a man in black clothes entered the establishments and stopped near their table. This person came to the table and greeted the guests of the city. He knew them and was glad to see Mrs. Cho after so many years. Yan replied that she really hadn't seen this person for a long time and said that it had already been about a year since their last meeting. In front of her stood the gentleman, so the same man who ordered the robber to kidnap the lady, and now he is standing in front of them and smiling sweetly. He said that his heart bled. He was anxious all this year. He constantly worried about Miss Yeon Jin-young was very surprised when hear the beautiful words that this gentleman said. Never before seen a person who speaks so calmly about his feelings and experiences. Mr. Tak apologized to the girl for the incident that happened in the forest with the robbers. He said that there was a misunderstanding due to the fact that these robbers misunderstood his order. He said that he simply asked these people to politely escort the lady along with her carriage to the city, but these people were too motivated and did everything very differently. Yan was very indignant at such an act and said that because of these robbers, a person almost died. He told her that luckily everyone remained alive, so I asked these robbers to keep their mouths shut so that they do not spread at all and do not even mention this incident that happened in the forest. Tak said that he had already married to the sea dragons for such a terrible deed, and all the problems had already been solved, so there was no need to worry because of this. Jenyan did not believe a single word of this man. He seemed very self-confident to him. Tak paid attention to the guy and said that he was very surprised when he heard about the great war that is able to defeat the whole, lose alone, because the robbers reported to him about everything that happened in the forest. And Jin-young replied that it was all true. Jinan had a negative attitude towards this master and did not trust him, and even though he had just been praised, he still said that he wanted to talk to this master. The guy told him that this is not the first time he sees people like him, and usually such people end their lives very badly, so they always need to be careful. So he answered that this rule applies to all people who mastered martial arts, and he will take care of his future fate without other people's advice. Yan watched the dialogue of these two guys and realized that the presence of this gentleman was starting to annoy her. She kindly asked him to leave them because they were very tired and wanted to rest, and the company of this gentleman was now disturbing them. Yan reminded that on the way to this city, he caused them very big problems when he forced the robbers to kidnap her, and therefore they were very tired solving this problem, mister. So the girl is not inclined to communicate with him today, and said that he would immediately leave their society and allow them to rest. But then, he added that he would visit them again tomorrow and try to communicate with them again. Yang replied that she didn't want to meet him, and he shouldn't come to them in the morning because they wake up early in the morning and go to the next city of Taishan. But he didn't seem to hear her, and just smiled, and said that in any case he would visit them tomorrow, whether they wanted it or not. Jinan started to get pissed off this man, and he wanted to wait as soon as possible for the moment when this guy would already leave here. It was already morning the next day, the weather was even better than yesterday, and they gathered their things in order to go to the next city. Jinan watched the clouds that floated across the sky. Suddenly, this gentleman appeared. He nevertheless visited them in the morning, and the guy began to enrage it even more. He hoped that this person would not come. A guy ran out of the house and joyfully greeted the guests. He was glad to see all these people in his yard. He was surprised when, in addition to the guests, even Brother Tak himself came to visit him. He approached the lady, took her by the hand, and said that he was very pleased to see such a beautiful flower visiting him. He asked his brother, why did he come here, and told about what people say among themselves that he has been getting along well with Miss Yongho lately. So he began to feel embarrassed at that moment and said that people are talking complete nonsense and all this is not true. But the guy took his hand on his shoulder and asked why this gentleman reacted seriously. Maybe something happened to him. He laughed when he realized what was the whole problem with his reaction. It was because he was embarrassed to talk about other girls in front of Miss Cho Tak removed his hand from her shoulder and asked what kind of nonsense this person was talking about. But the guy said that the news of Mr. and Mrs. Younghwa had reached him. He said that he heard about the engagement of Miss Yongho and brother next month. Tak asked if he understood everything correctly or did he hear the wrong rumor. Already the whole city was talking about the fact that these two fell in love with each other when they went on a joint trip, and this guy thought that it was all true. Tak replied that he met her while traveling, and it was absolutely an accident when he found her. He replied that maybe there are rumors and go-between people at the wedding and engagement with this lady, but she is not included in his plans at all, so this is all untrue. The guy apologized to his brother and said that he just hoped the engagement wouldn't be broken because his brother was so chasing another girl while he was negotiating marriage with Mrs. Gonson. Mr. Tak asked Ha Gung-san to close his mouth and continue to watch his tongue, because now he absolutely does not understand what he is saying. San put his head down and sighed heavily. He said that his brother has an unbearable temper that ruined his engagement with Miss Gong-san, and now from Miss Yongho. So he hit his brother in the face with his fist, but he did not close his mouth and behaved in a disgusting way. Jin Young and Young watched all these performances from the sidelines and were shocked by what is happening here now. They didn't imagine this morning at all. Tak said that he hit his brother because he did not watch his tongue at all, despite the fact that he had already warned him repeatedly and asked him not to talk about it in the presence of other people. San whined his mouth because his lip cracked and blood flowed. He accused his brother of not being able to control his emotions at all and immediately getting into a fight. He used his magic chakra and prepared for battle. He said that he hadn't fought his brother for a long time, and it was time to teach him a lesson. So he began to gather his chakra around him, and fire began to appear near his body. He was ready to fight with his brother. They stood opposite each other and prepared for battle. They had already pissed each other off enough this morning. Jin Young was very surprised when he heard all this story about the son of the head of the trade associations. He could not even think that he had such a history with different women. Jin Young noticed that this gentleman is much stronger than the Great Triad, and thought that he might even be as strong as Young Jun. Young asked the guy if it was necessary to separate these two brothers. After all, they will kill each other now, and he answered her that the two of them are not at all like those people with whom you can negotiate and calm them down. A lady came out of the house and asked why she heard such a terrible noise in the yard, and what was happening here. She replied that the commemoration was not over yet, and that it was not the best time to arrange fights. She accused Mr. Tak of using his internal energy instead of performing rituals and called him her brother. She simply asked her younger brother to meet the guests and did not even think that a fight could start here. She did not like it at all and was not part of her plans. The mistress asked her brother to explain himself and tell her why a fight almost started here now. Sun felt embarrassed. He didn't know how to explain to his sister about what had just happened here. Tak said it was his fault because he made a mistake and went to compete with his brother in a duel. He apologized to his mistress for the inconvenience he caused her this morning because he did not want it to happen like this. She just now noticed her brother Tak and pretended to be very surprised to meet him now. She replied that she was very much at this meeting, so he said that he was also very glad to see her. Yan bowed to this lady and said that she had not seen Sister Ha for a long time, and the lady praised her for visiting them all the same. Yan said that they put a lot of effort into organizing the wake. Ha replied that it was her duty and she had to do it in the best possible way, so it's okay, don't worry about it. She asked her guests to follow her younger brother's son and said that she would soon be able to join them as well. In the end, the girl added that she was very glad to meet, and that she had something to say to Mrs. Young Jinan, walked through the territory of this palace and looked around him, certain. Ask him why he is walking alone now because he should be next to that girl in order to help her if something happens to her. He told the demon that nothing could be done about it because she said that she needed to speak to Mrs. Ha in private. He worried about what was going on in these people's room, because they did not inspire any confidence in the guy, and he was afraid that I could not offend mistress. But suddenly the guy heard strange sounds not far from him and turned his head. He decided to see what was happening there. A man in red clothes was sitting in front of him, and the guy was doing something, carefully watching him, and suddenly it seemed to him that he knew him. It seemed to him that this man's name was Taoist. The demon of the guy. What is happening now, and why is he watching him so carefully? But the guy did not answer the demon and said that everything is in order. This man suddenly disappeared somewhere, as if he was not here, and the guy did not understand what had happened. He was sure that he just saw this person here. But now he has disappeared, and Jin Young ran to this place in order to find out what happened here. What is he here about the fact that in this world there are a lot of people with special abilities that few people apparently know about? This person was one of them. The demon said that ordinary people do not know about Jin Young's abilities, and just like that they will not be able to deceive him, because his eyes see more than the eyes of ordinary people. Sertan saw the inscription Chang Sin on the ground. And she said that this inscription is written in an ancient language, and it means the body. Jin Young said that this is all very interesting to him. It will be funny to figure it out because it's not every day that he sees a person suddenly disappear. An old man appeared near him. He approached very quietly and imperceptibly. The guy paid attention to him when this old man was already very close. He turned to this old man and wanted to ask him a few questions. The old man himself was just passing by and did not expect anyone to talk to him at all. Jinan asked this man if he could ask him a few questions. The old man stood hunched over not far from the guy and said what exactly he wanted to know. This young man. He asked if a skinny Taoist with disheveled hair lived near here. Maybe the old man once saw such a person here nearby. The old man said that he saw one such person here, and this guy always seemed crazy to him. Jinan to grandfather. Why does he think this person is crazy? What were the reasons for treating this Taoist like that? Grandfather replied that this man went crazy 20 years ago, and he is not here because of the funeral ceremony, just wandering around the palace grounds. He said that this man is just crazy. You should not pay attention to him. He is harmless and will not harm anyone, but he always walks around the palace grounds by himself. Jinan. Ask your grandfather if he knows where you can find this crazy Taoist historian. Tell him that it is pointless to look for this crazy man, and ask why the guy doesn't want to meet him so much. The old man did not want to understand why this young man needed this crazy man, and simply said that he knew where to find him. He said that he would tell about one place where this guy constantly looks. Jinan in the middle of the road, and looking at the night starry sky, he was watching a huge moon that lit the way like a big lantern. Jinan noticed that from the top of the mountain, the moon looks completely different. Otherwise, it is beautiful in its own way here, and I want to watch it even more when you are on the top of the mountain. He heard someone standing behind him, and he had been watching this person for a long time, but did not show what he noticed, and finally he decided to say out loud that he was noticed, and the person could stop hiding. Jinan turned his head towards the forest, and saw how a man began to leave from there. He was not mistaken, his hearing did not fail him, and there really was someone. It really was the same crazy old man that he was told about. It was a Taoist. He came out of the forest and asked the guy who he was. Jin Young replied that this person didn't need to know his name, because it didn't make any sense. Now it didn't matter. Taoist. Ask the guy why they met, because if his name wasn't important right now, then what was really important? He looked at the guy and called his name Chasan Jinan. What was written on the ground next to this word was a half-erased text in an ancient language. Chasen, asked the guy, why does he need ancient writings, and why is he so interested in it? Because it is very rare to see a young man interested in ancient writings. Jinan replied that he was just very interested in the ancient writings, and asked if there was a reason why the young scholar should not know this. Chasen lowered his head down and closed his eyes. He replied that the guy's curiosity was indeed justified, and said that he wanted to ask him another question. He asked the Jin Young whether he came here alone or took some other people with him, because their further meetings depended on it and what they would talk about. Old man. Ask the guy if there is someone else inside him, for example, a demon or some kind of creature. He felt that this boy was not simple. He was not like all other people. Jinan asked this man what exactly he wants to know, and what does his question mean? Does he suspect that inside the guy who lives the truth from his own chasen? Wherein this guy is a very strange energy, he feels it from a distance. That's why he asked such a question. He replied that his energy is inhuman and completely different. Such energy is usually used by demonic creatures or some monsters not from our world. Pren understood that this old man meant his inner demon Sertana, and answered him that it would be difficult to answer this question. But Jinan said that he can't harm anyone, so you shouldn't be afraid and worry about this. The old man looked at the guy carefully, and asked once again, "Is your inner being really harming anyone?" Jinan said that this being that lives inside him can't even harm him, not to mention the other living beings that surround him. The old man was alert when he heard these words from the guy. He did not understand how to react to him. The old man lowered his head down and replied that there are many mysterious things happening in the world that are hard to find answers to, and you can't be sure if he didn't say that he was very pleased that one of these mysterious things was now standing right in front of him. Jin Young replied that he is very grateful to this man for thinking that about him. Jinan said that for the first time he sees a person who is able to notice his energy, and asked how this Mustarik managed to see another being in him. The old man looked at this guy, then turned around, lowered his head and told him to follow him and start walking towards the forest. Jinan had to decide what to do. He did not understand how much he could trust this old man, but in the end he nevertheless agreed and followed him. They came through the forest and went to the waterfall. They started climbing on the rocks, and at some point the old man stopped. Jinan stood close to the old man and asked what exactly this man wanted to show him. He asked the guy that he was here, and a huge wall appeared in front of which a lot of different symbols from the ancient language were drawn, which modern people know nothing about. Jinan replied that he sees all these inscriptions, but he was interested to know why the old man showed him this place. On one of the inscriptions was written, Chosen Ihon, translated into our people. This phrase means 2 souls in one body. The Taoist replied that it was one of the 18 writings he could find, and he confessed that he had read all the books in the master's room without his knowledge. And that is why I was able to see in the guy the hidden potential of a second soul that no one else knows about. But he admitted that this is not enough. These letters are only a small part of what he was able to learn, and further he had no progress. Taoist, invite the young scientist to try to solve all these letters with him, because he himself was not able to do it. He wanted to decipher the ancient writings with him and learn as much as possible about the people who have 2 souls inside. He wanted to know how many other people in the world have a second soul. Jinan said that he studied these writings for a very long time, so he knows very little about them, and it will take a very long time to interpret these writings. The Taoist of the guy, does he have someone who is able to immediately interpret all these letters and make them out without spending a lot of time on it? Jinan remembered his father because he was the only person who was able to study this entire wall and translate all these letters in a short period of time. But more than 10 years have passed since he was imprisoned in the Imperial dungeon, and he did not even know that he was alive, father or not. Taoist. Ask the guy if he wants to save this person, and the guy answered the old man that this is his main goal, and therefore he is now heading to the server in order to save him. The Taoist replied that he would go with him and help him save this man, so that later he would help him decipher all these ancient writings. They left this place and started heading towards the city in order to return back. They walked in silence for a very long time, but at some point, yes, I decided to turn to the guy and say something Taoist. Ask the guy why did he have to dress up so beautifully because he feels uncomfortable in new clothes. Jinan asked the old man, is he really going to go to the mountains? This is in those rags that he met him. This appearance is not at all appropriate, and he would not want to be accompanied by a person who walks in tatters. The Taoist asked the guy, is it really so important? And the guy answered him, that there are limits to everything. You need to be responsible for your appearance so that there are no problems in the future. Jin Young asked this man who he wanted to meet before leaving to say goodbye because they will be gone for a very long time. He does not know when they will come back here next time, and if they will even be able to come back Taoist farewell to meet his mentor and say goodbye. He wants to see him one last time before leaving. He admitted that his mentor had harbored a grudge against him for 20 years and had to meet with him once before leaving in order to resolve past conflicts. Jinan said that after 20 years of resentment that was between them, this person can get so angry that he will even kill him. But yes, he reacted normally to this and even laughed. He said that everything is in order and replied that his mentor is not such a cruel person. The Taoist said that he would go to see his mentor now and asked the guy to wait here and not go with him because they needed to figure everything out. Alone, Jinan stayed waiting on the street near the house, and Taoist went to visit his master, and he opened the door and said, "Mentor, we haven't seen you for a long time. The time has come," and after that he disappeared. He closed the door behind him, and Jin Young stood and waited for this person to finally return. A couple of minutes after this, Taoist entered the house and screams began to appear from the house. These were screams, and his mentor he shouted at the Taoist, but that shameless person. And why did he even decide to probably give it? The mentor yelled at his student and said that for all the troubles that he had done, it was necessary to kill this guy a long time ago. Yeon heard screams from this house and decided to come and find out what was happening here. She asked the guy, "Why are these people in the building screaming so loudly? Maybe they have some problems or something happened." Jinan, that nothing terrible is happening there. You just had love cries of goodbye. The girl was very embarrassed when she heard these guys phrase love cries. Jin Young said that these people who are now yelling at each other in the building just had a lot of different grievances accumulated over 20 years, and therefore they need to sort it out among themselves. Now it may take a little time. Jin Young somehow looked very bad after meeting this mistress and asking her what happened, why she was so pale. She replied that nothing terrible had happened to this. The lady wanted to go with them to the north. She said that she was a little worried about her father, who was left alone in association, because something might happen to him. He must be very worried about everything that is happening right now. Jin Young replied that she had better worry about the mistress who wants to go with them because this lady can obviously cause problems. The girl laughed. Taoist flew out of his mentor's house and fell to the ground. Before the code, he said that he would come back here and visit the old man. The old man came out of the building and told him not to come here again, and if he doesn't come next time, he'll just kill this idiot. He doesn't need such a lazy and useless person who can't feed himself. The Taoist was very angry with his mentor because he wanted to apologize to him for everything he had done in 20 years and ask him for forgiveness, but everything turned out absolutely not the way he wanted it. Jinan asked this Taoist if he could have avoided such a conflict or if it was beyond his power. He replied that this is the best way to release the old man's anger, because this man was already so angry at everyone that he needed to take out this anger on someone, and who, besides his best student, could help the old man pour out all his anger. Yes, he admitted that he was already used to it and just helped the old man calm down a little. Jinan was surprised to hear such words from this person. He could not believe that someone in this world is capable of such a noble deed. Listen to these very many insults in your address only to make the other person feel better. Young asked the guy, who was this person who was now standing in front of them because he didn't tell her anything about him at all. He said his name is Guang, and he recently met this young man. The old man laughed and said that after meeting this young man, he made such good friends that he decided to go north with him. It was magnificent weather, clouds floated across the sky, and the sun shone so brightly that the desire to smile stopped every minute more and more. The carriage set off again and headed north. Young Guan was lying on a bench. The guy was trying to fall asleep all this time. He sat with his arms folded on his chest and also tried to sleep at least a little, but he couldn't. He was constantly disturbed by various thoughts that did not allow him to rest in peace. He thought that Sun was accompanying them on their way north only because Miss Ha-ju Ryong was with them. And he did not mind that the lady was traveling with them. He did not understand why I needed this, but nevertheless he treated her more or less positively. Most of all, he was worried that the same strange guy went with them, which annoyed him very much, and he could not be in the same space with this man. This man seemed to be the most disgusting guy that Jinan had ever seen, this gentleman. So he acted very narcissistic and vile one, and the accompanying guard drove ahead of everyone, and at some point he noticed something strange. He then heard some strange sound, and decided to listen better because it could be another ambush or a raid that was waiting for them. He raised his hand and asked all the other crew members to stop so that he could check what was happening there. Mr. Sun drove up to him and asked what happened and why their carriage stopped. In front of them was a small group of people. They were all dressed in white clothes and sat on the ground. San was dissatisfied with the fact that these people blocked the whole road and did not let him pass, but the guard asked him to pay attention to their clothes. They were the mountain dwellers of Zhongmyong. San asked the guard why these people are blocking the passage and not allowing them to pass. The guard replied that he did not know why. These people block their way, but said that they are definitely not enemies for them. After all, they have quite good relations with people from these places. One of the soldiers approached the captain and asked what was the matter and what should they do now, because they did not have time to stay here for a long time. At that moment, the mountain dwellers noticed a wagon that was not far from them. One of the mountain people informed all the rest of his brethren that 2 people were approaching them. Their leader warned all other members of the group to prepare for an attack. At that moment, while 2 guards were approaching these mountain people in order to ask them kindly to clear the passage for them, the mountain people themselves began to take out their weapons. Jinan felt a very strange energy. He realized that everything is not so simple here, and most likely these people are not as benevolent as the captain thinks. Taoist Guang also felt a very strange energy coming from these people and asked what happened. He woke up because he felt this strange energy, but when he turned his head, there was no one around him. Jinan approached the captain to warn him of his suspicions. He urgently needs to withdraw the soldiers, because this most likely could be a trap. The captain asked about some kind of trap, the guy is now telling him, because they were the most ordinary mountain people, and he didn't see anything suspicious here. Sun also agreed with Jin Young and asked the captain to call the people back just to play it safe and be on the lookout. That those people were not their enemies. But at the same moment, they abruptly stood up and jumped on 2 soldiers who did not suspect anything. These people pounced on 2 soldiers who did not even have time to get their weapons, and they immediately killed them by piercing them with swords several times. The captain really couldn't believe his eyes. It was a trap, and 2 of his soldiers died so fast he didn't even realize what had happened. These people looked very dangerous, bloodthirsty. They were ready to kill everyone who stood in their way, but no one understood why they did it. One of these monsters stepped on the body of a dead soldier and then stepped over it. The captain asked these people why they did this and what was going on here. He did not understand why these people decided to attack them. They looked very dangerous. Although these people should have been allies for their association, they began to gather in a heap to go in the direction of the carriage. One of these people asked his leader what to do next. Their leader grabbed his sword and pulled it out of its sheath. After that, he said, "Break through the guards and kill the woman in the wagon." He pointed his sword in the direction of the carriages and gave the command to attack these people. Jinan was already standing and waiting for a collision with these people. He was ready for battle and understood that he still had to protect the carriage at any cost. The 3 of them jumped on the guy and he gathered chakra in his fist in order to stab him. He took out the opponent with 1 blow and pierced his body with his fist through and through. The other 2 thugs ran past Jinan. Why did these people run away? Because he thought they wanted to kill everyone and fight him too. At that moment, he realized that their goal was not to fight, but to kill Lady Cho. Jinan summoned the fairy Selfina. She was sleeping as usual at that moment, but he woke her up. She was unhappy with this and asked what he needed. The guy takes a selfie to make whirlwind and stop these 2 thugs from getting to the carriage. He used flame magic to set these people on fire. He decided to do a combination of 2 spells. The fairy made a very strong whirlwind that was able to stop these 2 thugs, and the guy used the fire release spells and combined the 2 spells together, resulting in a fire whirlwind. The fairy said that she wanted to go and continue sleeping. She didn't want to do anything else. The guy noticed that this fairy hadn't changed at all the last time he called her. Jinan noticed that the bodies of these 2 thugs were burned. They were lying dead on the ground. He noticed that when they use the most ordinary base in magic, the thirst for murder does not awaken in him like last time, and he feels calm without letting dark energy into himself. Thanks to this spell, Jinan understood what his problem was now. And now he understood what needs to be done so that the thirst to kill does not awaken in him. One of the thugs still didn't die and survived. He got up otherwise to shake himself off and try to understand what had just happened to him. The guy asked his demon to monitor the regulation of his magical power. The captain was attacked by one of the thugs and has already swung his sword in order to kill him. The captain dodged this man's sword and did it very easily when he saw him up close. He realized that these were not mountain dwellers. These were Zhongmyong warriors. He is very golden that these warriors decided to attack the carriage and kill the lady. He took out his sword from its scabbard, and with a quick blow of the ball killed his opponent. He asked these bastards how they dared to make such an assassination. He was immediately attacked by 3 more thugs. They began to surround him from different sides and try to attack. The captain was a very experienced warrior and went through more than one battle, but he did not know if he could deal with 3 opponents at once. But he still managed to make a series of quick attacks, and thanks to his fast wind technique, he was able to cut their throats with the blade of his sword. The captain felt that danger was approaching him from behind, and he needed to quickly decide what to do with the enemy behind him. Behind him, the enemy was already standing and wanted to strike from the back like a rat. But the captain managed to notice this in time and block this blow. Only thanks to his intuition, he now survived. He flew back after this blow and was barely able to stay on his feet. When he stopped, he was able to see the face of the thugs attacking him from behind. It was Du Chu Moon. The leader of all these thugs, he personally wanted to kill the captain from behind. This man made a leap and swung his sword over his head. He wanted to strike a very strong blow to defeat during the battle. The captain tried to understand why they decided on them on the pass. He asked this man directly, "Why are they doing this? Because they dress like mountain dwellers." It was very mean and few people could do such an act. This man didn't want to tell him why they did it. He just said it was none of his business. They continued their battle, and we threw each other quick blows with swords, after which we blocked and dodged. The captain used a quick wind blow technique and filled his sword with wind magic. He struck, but his enemy managed to dodge. The leader decided to immediately counterattack his opponent when he saw that he missed his blow. Due to the captain's mistake, this man was able to stab him with his sword and injure his hands, after which the captain dropped the sword from his hands. This man said that they would leave as soon as they deal with the girl. Other people are not interested in them, and then thanked the captain for recognizing him. But this man immediately changed his mind and said that now he wants to kill absolutely everyone here, because it will be more interesting this way. Guan Yu immediately went to the heart of the battle. He understood that he urgently needed to help the captain. Guang made a quick jump and kicked the sword out of the man's hands in midair. Guang said that you can immediately see from the face of this person that he is a psycho and there is no point in communicating with him. He did not expect that the course of the battle would turn so much that another person would appear to confront them. He was very surprised when he saw that this man blocked his sword with just one kick. He raised his sword from the ground, but then felt that his hand was numb. The blow was so strong that he now cannot control his hand. He realized that the person who is now standing in front of him was very strong, and he needed to be dealt with as quickly as possible. He immediately decided that he needed to hit his opponent very hard and cut him into 2 halves. He swung his sword and delivered a very strong blow that was supposed to kill anyone who falls under the blade of the sword. After the blow, he saw something completely different from what he wanted to see because there was no one in front of him. His opponents very quickly ran away, evaded the blow. Only a huge hole remained after this strong blow. Guan was able to disappear at the moment he needed. It was one of those techniques that he mastered very well, and now he teleported over the head of his opponent. The enemy felt that this man was now above his head, and he needed to quickly decide how he would fight off this attack. He grabbed his sword and made a quick swing to block the blow. He managed to block the Dawes' blow with his sword, but barely, or put the sword in a defensive position. Guan jumped back and landed on the ground, after which he just sat quietly for a few seconds in order to come up with a new plan of attack. Guan began to deliver very fast blows from different sides, but his opponent was strong enough and fought back for some time. But after 4 attacks, he began to lose his vigilance, and the Taoist began to inflict a very strong blow on him, which was no longer possible to block. This man did not understand how to fight off this crazy warrior. He grabbed his sword with his hand and tried to fill it with magical energy in order to launch a strong counterattack. Guang was quite a nimble fighter, able to dodge this attack. Guang knew that he couldn't let this man break through his defenses and let him stab him in the chest. He is a very fast jump-up, and despite the hundreds of blows that flew at him, he still managed to dodge them in flight. Guang found the right moment to launch his counterattack and finally break through this man's defense. He no longer understood how to fight off this crazy warrior, because none of his techniques could help him get through to him. Guang did his signature technique, which allowed him to land a very strong kick from the side. You were able to break through his defenses and kick him right in the head after this kick. Few people were left alive. After this blow, his teeth began to fly out in different directions. The pain he experienced was unbearable. Guang asked this man before he passed out if he expected to fight such a crazy enemy. After this blow, the enemy fell to the ground. He broke his shoulder after he fell because the blow was very strong, but he still managed to get up after this blow. He understood that he would not be able to defeat his opponent. The only thing he could do in this situation was to shamefully run away. He made a jump, and after that, Dao still didn't understand why this guy decided to run away. Jinan at that moment fought with the rest of the thugs and scattered them in different directions one by one. He dealt one of them a strong blow with his fist and broke his skull. He hit this guy so hard that after hitting, he almost or not fell through the ground. Jinan asked the rest of his group members to quickly fight these idiots and finish this fight because he was starting to get tired. This psycho decided not to leave the battlefield, but simply change his opponent and attack the guy. He thought that this guy would be weaker than his previous enemy. He at least someone before he runs away from here. Because he had no desire to leave empty-handed, Jinan managed to grab this man's hand and prevent him from slashing with his sword. He asked him who he was and why he decided to attack him. Jinan started squeezing his hand so hard that the man started writhing in pain because he couldn't do anything else. He told Jinan that he himself is from the Baekma fortress, and if this guy breaks his arm, then he will have to answer for his act later. One recovered during the battle and shouted very loudly that the leader had been defeated and their affairs were very bad, so he called on all the other thugs to immediately retreat back in order to die here. But San stopped these people with a threatened sword so that they could not escape. The soldiers surrounded the remaining group of these thugs and herded them into a trap in the middle of the battlefield. The captain ordered all the rest of his soldiers not to let anyone go and to detain absolutely everyone who attacked them. These people had to pay for what they had done and for killing 2 good soldiers. Suddenly, a lady appeared on the battlefield. The soldiers paid attention to her and asked what she was doing here, but she told them that she wanted to pass and asked them to make way. The captain limit madam that it's very dangerous here now. She'd better go back to the wagon because she could bring trouble on herself if these people want to attack again. She said that everything is fine and she was very surprised that the great Du Chu Moon himself came for her. She looked into the eyes of one of these thugs and made sure that they were called here from the fortress in order to kill her. She said that these people were hired by the mountain dwellers to kill her, and it was all because her clan was at odds with the trade association, so they ordered her head. I knew that these people wanted to kill her at the request of a man named Mangiam. Jinan was surprised when he realized that their target was a completely different lady. He all this time thought that these people were encroaching on Lady Cho. She asked the captain to let all these people go safe and sound. The captain was very indignant at this decision of the lady, because he did not understand why she was doing this, and the lady answered him that it would be better for them to leave with their carriage from here and ask the captain to take care of the wounded soldiers and bandage their wounds. Jinan didn't understand why the mistress ordered all these people to be released because they tried to kill her and deserved to die or deserved to be arrested. Miss Ha, to let all these people go, explained that they already had very heavy losses because of her clan. She asked all these people to return to her fortress and say hello to the Lord, to tell him that she is still alive and their mission failed. She tells the Lord that his warriors lost this battle and fled from here in disgrace, and thanks to the mistress they all remained alive. The warrior lowered his head down and replied that he would convey everything to the Lord word for word at the request of this lady. This would be a sign of gratitude for the fact that she spared them. They started to run away one by one from the battlefield, and the soldiers were very indignant that they still had to let all these thugs go. She asked the captain to collect the files of all the wounded soldiers on both sides, and heal their wounds, and then go on the road again. The captain did not agree with this decision, but still he had no choice, and he had to do it. Jinan was watching the mistress closely all this time, and judging because she said earlier the fortress which she said would be a predicament for her. Jinan understood that these people should be extremely grateful to this mistress, because it is only thanks to her that they are still alive and have the opportunity to return to their fortress. He understood that if these people want to continue to exist normally, and I feel safe, they will have to forget about trading with the association forever after this act. Miss Ha was about to go to her carriage, but before leaving, she noticed the guy. She looked at him carefully, but Jin Young did not pay attention to her at all, and this made the girl very angry. She turned her head and went on. Jinan did not understand at all what this girl was thinking now. Her actions seemed to him stupid and thoughtless. Miss Cho all this time stood near the carriage and watched everything that was happening. She was also very surprised by what happened now, but I had no time to get into these matters. She asked her sister if she was okay and how she felt. The situation had to endure a very difficult miss. Ha said that everything was fine with her, and you shouldn't worry about it at all because she did it as she saw fit. The girl all this time thought about that, guys. She could not believe that this young man really has such strong abilities. And in addition to his abilities, he was also able to combine 2 whole spells into one. She thought that if he was capable of this, then he could be very useful to her in the future, and she should find a common language with him. Yan saw the anxiety in front of her sister, did not understand what the problem was. She wanted to help and support her, but first, it was necessary to understand what this girl was thinking. Miss Ha replied that nothing terrible happened to her. She just dreamed a little and went into her thoughts. When she was about to enter the wagon, she told her sister that until the preparations were finished, it would be better for them to wait all this in the wagon and not look at the wounded soldiers, because this could have a bad effect on them in the future. All this time, Yan thought about what she saw in the eyes of her sister. She seemed to look into her soul again, and she became not mindful of what she noticed there. Young was peeping at her from around the corner and saw Miss Ha standing next to an unknown person and talking about something in the middle of the night in the courtyard. They looked at each other and talked about something, but she could not hear their dialogue. She did not understand what these people were talking about. Yan was able to take a closer look at the strange eyes this lady had. These eyes were not like human eyes, as if they were filled with some strange energy. She was very frightened when she saw this terrible look at the mistress and did not know what I should do with it now. After that, she transferred the memories of this lady to another space and was already in the middle of the courtyard, but only it was no longer night, but day. In the courtyard of Mrs. Ha, a dead man was lying near the wall. His body was pierced by a sword that stuck out in his heart area. This man was sitting leaning against the wall and dripping blood. Yan saw how people noticed this man and began to approach him. They did not understand what happened to him. No one knew about it, but if she saw it, then it was a memory in the soul of Miss Ha Young understood that this man in the yard was killed by the mistress herself, and now she could not even imagine what this girl was capable of next time. The man slammed his fist on the handle of his throne with all his strength. This man was angry. This man on the throne was the same lord from the tower about whom so much was said during the battle. His subjects came to him and told him that they had lost the battle. He was outraged by this and began to shout at his subjects for the fact that instead of killing them, the girl was disgraced by the Lord. He was very angry with them for dishonoring the name of Baekma Fortress. The Lord ordered his subjects to go and find out everything about those people who protect the lady. He needed to understand where they found such strong warriors who are ready to resist a whole detachment of the best fighters of this tower. Before him appeared a man with a bald head dressed in solid clothes. This man most likely holds a very important position in the tower. He did not address the owner. He told the Lord that he himself would personally deal with this matter and would do everything so that the name of the tower would not be defamed. The Lord thought about such a proposal, but he had some misgivings about this account. He asked this person who volunteered to do this task himself if he would do something stupid, like the last time he went on a task. The man did not understand what kind of nonsense the Lord was telling him, because he always performed his tasks perfectly, and there were no questions for him. The Lord said that he agreed to let him go on this task. It was this warrior who allowed him to go and find out everything about these people who are guarding the carriage. But before sending this man on a mission, he asked not to touch the people from the association, because it was not yet time to attack them, and you need to be very careful with them. Because if they touch the association now, then their peace contract will end forever. The warrior replied that he would do everything in the best possible way, as the Lord asked him, and immediately went on a mission. They stopped to spend the night in one of the cities. Sun and Tak walked around the territory of this hotel and talked to each other. Sun said that Jin Young has an outstanding ability in martial arts, and what he did during the fight can really be considered an amazing act, because it's not every day that you see a person who knows martial arts so well. So he said that this is just a martial art, and there is nothing surprising in this. He did not want to continue the conversation on this topic, and decided that it was better for him to leave and left his brother alone in the middle of this courtyard. Sun thought that if you can capitalize on this power, why not do it? Because if the guy is not really so good at martial arts, you can use it. It was already evening outside, and he was watching the moon light up the whole yard. Young came up to him and said that tomorrow they were leaving. She once again decided to thank the guy for the fact that he protected her for the second time and did not allow this thug to kill the lady. She said that if not for him, they would not have been able to get there alive. He asked her what she was going to do now after they arrived here, the girl that she has a message from the head, and these messages will affect her future fate. She said that in order to improve relations with the Sea Dragon fleet, they want to connect her with young Master Hagu Sang. She said that her father refused to marry Mr. Tuck because he attempted to assassinate her and wanted to steal it, which is not her father's credibility. The girl said that first you need to deal with this matter, and then think about what she will do next. Jin Young asked her why they wanted to marry her to this young master, and assumed it was Haju Ryong's idea. She replied that most likely everything is exactly as he says, although this is only her assumption. She cannot be sure of this. He said that it was all because she had an interest in the elder master, and this was all in order to get him. The girl replied that everything should be like that. But it was different. She said that the whole problem was precisely that she had magical eyes that could look into the soul of people, and the lady wants to make sure that no one will take anything away from her. Jin Young asked, what would happen if she still canceled this engagement? Yeon said that if she refuses, then the support of the fleet will be stopped. Even if the sea dragons are on the verge of extinction, then the association will not lend a helping hand. He said that the dark times had come, but nevertheless, if she needed help, he could always help her. She replied that she did not need help, and everything would be fine. She was just tired of everything that was happening, and wanted to talk to someone about her problems. She admitted that it was all very strange, and she never spoke heart to heart with anyone, because with him, after all, Jinan was an ordinary stranger for her and was not connected with her in any way. She crossed her arms and began to feel uncomfortable. She was very pleased to be near him, but she could not afford to get close to him. She asked him for one request that she had wanted to ask him for a very long time. She asked him that if there were big problems with the Sea Dragon fleet, if he could take care of her father. It came in the morning, and they gathered near the central gate. Guang looked at the thoughtful guy who had been standing near the gate all this time and dreaming about something, and asked him what happened yesterday. He did not understand what was happening to this guy, but told him that someday he would still return to his home. But now he is too depressed for this. Jin Young replied that he had one thing he needed to think about very carefully. He thought that he really wants to help the mistress fulfill her request, but now he was not at all up to it. He was very angry that the mistress had to marry the young master not of her own free will, only so that the fleet would remain with the support of the association. He lowered his head down and still could not stop thinking about it. He understood that he still had time, He could do something he really wanted to help this lady. But first, he had to deal with his father because it was much more important. Guang saw that the guy stopped near the building and asked him if they had come there. Jinan reached out his hand to the doorknob and knocked on the door. Then he removed his hand from the doorknob and could not believe that this moment had finally come. A man came up from the other side of the door and asked who was there. It was a woman's voice. Jinan recognized that voice. It was his babysitter. He said, "Babysitter, it's me." The woman said that she was already very old and hard of hearing, so she did not immediately understand who was standing on the other side of the door. She finally opened the door and asked the man who stood in front of her who he was. Jinan saw this woman and said, "Babysitter, you don't recognize me? It's me." Jinan, Nanny, was surprised when she saw this guy in front of her. She couldn't believe her eyes. She asked him if it was for real that he was the same young master who was taken away from her in childhood. She held his hands and began to cry. She couldn't believe that he had really returned home. Jinan said it was true, and he really came home. For the first time in so many years, he went to his home and could not get used to the fact that everything here was the same as before. He went into his father's office. It seemed to him that his father was still sitting there. He ran his hand across the surface of the table, and it brought back new memories for him. He began to yearn for those times when his father was still at home. Memories began to wake up in him, and he felt nostalgia. He stood for a long time, near this table at which my father constantly worked. He looked around him and remembered all the things that were here. They also remained lying in their places. He saw a picture on the wall and remembered that there was his father's vault. The demon said that he would have to go down there to decipher the ancient writings on the stone slab. Jinan replied to Demon Certain that he would definitely do it, but only after he saved his father. The nanny went into the room and asked the master if he had been here before, and the guy replied that he had not immediately noticed her presence here. Jinan replied that he was no longer at home and memories flooded over him. He said that he needed to save his father as soon as possible. The nanny did not want to upset him, but nevertheless she understood that she needed to tell him this now. She told them to the guy that his father had been for a very long time, and no one knows where he is. Jinan asked what it means and how his father disappeared. She told him that one day General Yuck came and told her that the prison in which his father was imprisoned collapsed, and he disappeared. He asked the nanny about which specific general. She says, was it really the same Yukdu Gam? The nanny answered that it was him. She told the boy that this general came from time to time with news from the master, the only way she could hold on to life and understand what was happening in general. She hoped all this time that his father was alive. Jinan asked the babysitter where his Uncle Jung is now, and she said he was dead. Gina almost fainted when she heard this. The nanny said that 2 years ago, on his way back from the imperial palace, bandits attacked him and killed him. He asked the nanny if these bandits were caught after they killed his uncle. She replied that no, there was a commotion for about a month. Then everything calmed down. Some person took the old man's body. Jinan did not understand how to react to all these events, and he wanted to find the offenders who killed his uncle. He tightly clenched his fist and said, "Father, what the hell is going on here? But don't be afraid, I'll find you soon."